Baby for Hodiers, Gullah Jack. I'm here with a special guest, Brother Jasper. And of course, as always, brothers Amos and Macaru. This is the Afrikan Liberation Media. The day's date is January 17th, 6261. A couple of talking points as it relates to Dr. King, who we celebrate on this particular day. The beauty of Dr. King was that when he made a mistake, he articulated this mistake in front of the masses of people, particularly on April 4th, 1967. He told us that there's a time when caution is betrayal. And that time has come for me as it relates to the war in Vietnam. Secondly, we make the argument that at the time of his death, he was the most powerful person in the country, the most powerful person politically in the country. It was Barry Goldwater who recognized this, and the President of the United States, Lyndon Johnson, said that N-word preacher is about to drive me from the White House. Oftentimes, Dr. King used analogies to illustrate what needed to happen. He outlined a blueprint for the country then as well as in the future. He told us that true compassion is more than flinging a coin at a beggar. We have to restructure the edifice that produces the beggar. The whole Jericho road must be changed as we journey along life's highways where men are typically fleeced and robbed. This is the Afrikan Liberation Media. I will cease and desist. Fit in where I get in. Gentlemen, take it wherever you want to take it.
Well, BB48 African family, once again, it's indeed an honor to be able to engage in conversations with these conscious brothers and to discuss, some issues that are affecting the struggle for the liberation and empowerment of African people. Today is indeed the 36th federal holiday for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., our esteemed ancestor. And I've written an article titled "The King We Need in 2022," which people can access via the Afrikan Liberation Media Facebook page. And I won't go into the depths of the article. I just read what I posted on the page and say one other thing. As millions of Americans celebrate the 36th Martin Luther King Jr. federal holiday, the United States is facing yet another moral crisis. The socio-political conditions in this country are in some ways more widely contentious than they were in the turbulent final years of Dr. King's life. During those final years, 1965 to 1968, America was racked with racial violence and urban rebellions driven by oppressive conditions, poverty, an anti-war movement, political repression, and the assassinations of those fighting the powers that be. The current conditions in the United States, exacerbated by the ebb and flow of the COVID pandemic, are a powder keg that can either explode into a civil war or something similar to Nazi Germany in the 1930s. The most obvious missing element in 22 are the strong Black voices of moral vision and action, which were represented by Dr. King, Malcolm X, Kwame Ture, then known as Stokely Carmichael, Jamil El-Amin, H. Rap Brown, Sada Shakur, Fred Hampton, Huey P. Newton, Kathleen Cleaver, Angela Davis, so many others who were engaged in struggle, James Foreman. And there was an anti-war white left. There's really no strong black voices of that caliber in the country today, and there's certainly no serious white left that existed in the late 1960s, mid to late 1960s, largely opposed to the war in Vietnam, not so much opposed to racial capitalism and imperialism as they perhaps should have been or could have been. While we will once again be inundated with the dream speech played by opportunists seeking black votes in 2022, the critical issues and views Dr. King articulated during his final 3 years will be largely ignored as usual. And if people read the article, I quoted heavily from 2 speeches that are often ignored, one titled "The Other America" and the other titled "The Three Evils of Society." These are the quotes from those speeches are not things that you would normally hear from the run-of-the-mill empire politicians and neo-colonial politicians and celebrities and others, athletes, all of the professional sports talking about Dr. King on every broadcast doesn't really amount to anything. I just want to point out one thing that perhaps is a coincidence, because I've been beating this drum, and I'll continue to, until it finally reaches the level of moral outrage that it should. Our young sister Fanta Bility was born on the same day as Dr. Martin Luther King, January 15th. She would have turned 9 this year had she not been killed by 3 Pennsylvania police officers on August 27, 2021. Those officers have still not been charged. The DA even refuses to release their names. Instead, he charged two black teenagers who were shooting at each other with first-degree murder for the kill shots fired by the police that murdered young Fanta. The best birthday wish we can have for Fanta is to continue to demand justice for her killing. Fanta's case deserves the same national attention as other police killing cases. Right now, the case is getting the most attention is the killing of a young 14-year-old from Chile who was killed by a member of the LAPD. I see Al Sharpton, Ben Crump, and the usual cast of characters all out in LA raising a bunch of cane about this particular case. And while they have totally ignored, I don't know of a single one of them who said anything about our 8-year-old sister, Fanta Bility. Delaware County District Attorney Jack Steimer or something or another declined the opportunity to directly charge Sharon Hill police for their reckless and deadly actions, and instead referred the matter to a grand jury. So the DA could have charged these officers himself, but he chose not to. Instead, he charged these 2 black teenagers, referred killings and brutality carried out of police to a grand jury. He could have done that, but instead, he chose to charge these 2 black teenagers with first-degree murder directly, and then refer the case of the police officers to a grand jury, which still hasn't reached a decision. I don't know what this grand jury is doing. They're obviously moving as slow as molasses at the South Pole. But one of the things that we should note here is that every time we see these cases where there's either no indictment or a lame pro-police indictment, like the case like Breonna Taylor with the Negro up there, the Attorney General up there, who just didn't even attempt to prosecute the officers. It points out something that Sister Michelle Alexander raised in her book, The New Jim Crow, and that is the prosecutors are the most powerful force in the law enforcement system. And that just, they are the ones who really make all of these decisions. But, as Tahira Farrah Bradley says, to get through the entire system without being impacted at some level by white supremacy is just is something that rarely happens. But here, once again, you have a district attorney stonewalling the indictment, or stonewalling the grand jury's indictment of these 3 police officers, 2 white and 1 black, that killed this 8-year-old sister who just coincidentally happened to be born on the same day as our esteemed ancestor, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Go ahead, brothers.
Yeah, when that story, when you originally brought it to our attention last year, once it happened, it sounded ludicrous at that point to me, how a gunfight that took place between 2 people that left the scene, and then you have these police officers roll up and just start shooting and shoot a innocent child. How they are not charged for that child's murder is baffling at best to me. I don't see how any law could support that logic.
Yes, ludicrous, brother. It's absolutely ludicrous. And one of these organizations now that's picked this up, the Amistad Law Project, was able to get an article in Newsweek magazine. But by and large, this case just has not, it boggles my mind that it hasn't gotten the attention that the same attention that Ahmaud Arbery deserved, that George Floyd deserved, that Breonna Taylor deserved, even though there was no justice in the Breonna Taylor case, except for the fact that her fiance was able to be exonerated, have the charges dropped against him. But it's just mind-boggling to me how this young lady got killed, this 8-year-old, walking with her family home from a football game. 2 fools start shooting at one another, and police officers who have no idea who's doing the shooting simply fire at a car they see leaving the scene. 2 black women were in the car. Miraculously, neither one of them was shot, although one was hit by flying glass as the bullets shattered the windows of the car. And then here's young Fanta and her brother and another teenager over on the sidewalk just trying to go home, and boom, she gets shot and killed. And the other 2 were shot and wounded, and the police are free. Unbelievable. But this is America, as Fannie Lou Hamer would say.
And let me ask you this: if these 2 people are charged with, or I guess are convicted, found guilty of murdering Fanta, even though they didn't pull the trigger, does that remove the family's ability to seek a lawsuit against the police department for the death of the young girl?
No, because that would be a civil case. So the criminal charges against the 2 young men, who by the way, if they are convicted, the sentence is life without parole. So these 2 teenagers shooting at one another after a football game, which in and of itself, is just another example of the problem we have with so many guns in the hands of so many people that will just pull the trigger and shoot, particularly at one another. They're not so quick to shoot at other people, for example, but they are very quick to shoot at one another. But they could get life without parole for first-degree murder based on the transferred intent law that they basically put in place to cover for police, I believe, transferred intent. And but that would not impact a civil suit, which I believe the family has already filed a civil suit. So But could it dampen the possibilities, reduce the possibilities of some kind of settlement? Well, that's certainly a possibility. But in this case, I mean, how can these guys not be charged and sentenced, just like the McMichaels, right? I mean, just like Chauvin. I mean, I don't see how. But that's the system may do all kinds of things. The thing that has me upset more than anything, brother, almost, is the lack of moral outrage and national attention in the black community. Where in the hell is Black Lives Matter? Where are they? Sitting on a toilet stool. I mean, what are
in those checks?
Yeah, yeah, collect. They can't make any money off of this because I mean, you would think that this would fit in right down their line, but I'm just is it at the point where if we don't have a video, we don't get outraged anymore?
I think that is a part of it. But for these guys to be charged and facing life without parole, I don't know if I could think of one case of a police officer killing not just a black person, but anybody, and facing and being sentenced to life without parole.
Hey, the perfect example will be coming up on February the 3rd with Jason Van Dyke. Shot Laquan McDonald 16 times, a total of 24 bullet wounds with the entry and exit wounds, was given an absolutely pathetic travesty of justice sentence of 81 months because he was facing second-degree manslaughter, I think it was, second-degree manslaughter, and 16 counts of aggravated battery with a firearm, which in Illinois, aggravated battery with a firearm carries a minimum sentence of 6 years. So he had 16 charges of aggravated battery, which the jury found him guilty on. They found him guilty on all 17 charges, the manslaughter charge and the aggravated battery charges. The judge decided to lump all of the friggin' charges together. This is what I was concerned about that may happen with the McMichaels, that they may just try to lump them all together. But that judge there was, Southern judge, quite amazing. But I don't know. Sometimes when you find, a white man in the South that's just, he's really just. And so Van Dyke, on February 3rd, he will have served 3 years, 3 months, and 9 days, and he will be released from prison. 24 shots, 24 bullet wounds, an assassination essentially, and 3 years, 3 months, and 9 days.
With video.
And Willie Simmons in Alabama has been in jail. Now this will be coming up on 40 years for a $9 robbery.
Chime in, Brother Jasper. Help us.
I don't know about helping, but just to add, I'm gonna do what you like to do, Elder Gullah Jack, and quote Robert Amos Wilson.
Can't go wrong.
Can't go wrong. He says, the law is nothing but one group making the rule to protect its interests against another group, and the capacity for one group then to enforce that rule and therefore supporting your own oppression. So when we talk about law, I'm paraphrasing Robert Amos Wilson, but he talks about how the criminals who created the United States of America, the laws can only be criminal, and breeds a level of criminality in the society. So if you have criminals beginning a society, then what do you expect the society to become itself, over periods of time? We have senators and representatives supposedly of the people who create these laws, enforce these laws, or enact new laws, and they themselves are clear criminals. You know, when you have people like Nancy Pelosi, who you know, is using insider trading tips that sent their own people like Martha Stewart to jail, but they themselves, because they're a part of the government, they don't go to jail, but they get handsomely rich because they have this insider trading tips, and then they, you know, they move their stocks back and forth however they need to. You know what I mean? And so, you know, they only enforce the law when it suits them or doesn't suit them. And I think in the McMichael's case, you know, it didn't really suit them to allow these people, you know what I mean, to go free. Whereas in the case for the officer that shot Laquan McDonald, I mean, you still have to deal with the thin blue line situation that's, you know, across the entire country. So you're going to have people who, you're going to have police officers who will stand up in rebellion at some point if things don't go the way that they, you know, that benefits them. You know, you see quite often, or you hear, you know, people of our community, especially like the rappers, say, hey, you know, who said it? The biggest gang in the city are the police officers. You know what I mean? And so they have to protect their own at all costs. So of course they're going to run those charges concurrently for the officer that shot, what's his name, Van Dyke, who shot Laquan McDonald. But again, it's a part of the criminal society that criminals created. So of course the criminals are going to win, as long as the people who are enforcing the laws are criminals themselves. And then they see the criminals as one of their own. So what are we to do? You know what I mean? But understand what the situation is. But just to backtrack a little bit, just to go back to, you know, today being the celebration, or the nationally recognized celebration of Dr. MLK, you know, from our studies of African history, we have to remember that there had to be a level of duality. You know, you didn't have a male god without a female counterpart, or vice versa. And so what we have to also, or who we have to also recognize, is now the ancestor, Coretta Scott King, in all the work that she did in making sure that Dr. King was able to move how he needed to move, raising the family, holding him down, being, you know, moral support or what have you. And so we definitely have to recognize the contributions that she put in as well. But I'll stop there for now.
Yeah, I think it's an excellent point that you made. Police, they have an extra layer of protection automatically generated or given to them based upon just their police status. And they're often pretty consistent with it, even as it relates to non-white police officers that murder innocent people. They also get protected by that, you know, police protection. We just saw in the case last year, Muhammad Noor, a few of his charges got lowered and dropped, and his time was shortened. So a similar situation with this Jason Van Dyke situation. If you go and research a lot of police officers who have been found guilty and convicted and sentenced to time in prison, most of those cases are often shortened. Those sentences are often shortened. We saw it with, you know, the officers involved in the beating of Rodney King. You know, first they were found, you know, not guilty. Then later, after they're being tried again, they were found guilty, but they served a shorter sentence than the sentence that they originally received.
Most recently, gentlemen, there was a case where the police tased a shirtless man. The man was set on fire and he subsequently died. The police left the room where the man was burning. You know, the behavior is becoming more and more abysmal and more heinous.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's, well, I think it's symptomatic of the unraveling of American society. And you know, I think you can expect the level of brutality to continue. I mean, there was a case. Tahira sent me an article. I didn't bother to post it because it was somewhere in Florida. There was a Haitian brother that had lost it. He was causing a major problem at this store. The police came up on him, and they were able to arrest him. They had him in handcuffs, and they were putting him in the car. And then this sergeant that came up looking like Reinhard Heydrich or Adolf Eichmann or somebody, and just escalated the situation, and was apparently calling the Haitian brother the N-word and all of this kind of stuff. And the guy is laying in the police car, in the backseat of the car, trying to lean as far away from this guy as he could, and with his hands behind his back. And the guy pulled this guy, who's a sergeant. He pulled out his pepper spray, and a female officer. Now they covered her face. She looked like she was white. She may have been Hispanic. She may have been demelanated like me, but she went up to. There was some male officer standing beside this guy where he was doing this. They didn't do anything. The female officer grabbed the officer by his service belt and pulled him back. And he turned around and said to her, "Don't ever bother me when I am doing something to an N-word," and then proceeded to choke the female officer, whatever she was. And this happened in November. And this guy choked a female police officer and is still on the police force. Maybe they wanted to send a message to her: don't bother us when we get ready to beat up a person of African descent. That's the level at which this country is heading. And in the midst of all of this, we're busy killing one another.
I think it was that type of domestic situation that started the feminist movement, where white women felt disempowered by their counterparts. And then our black women just jumped into the fray because they needed the numbers. I believe that's how it went.
That is so typical. And as our esteemed elder Stokely Carmichael, aka Kwame Ture, informed us, you have to organize. You don't ever join a coalition where you are functioning from a position of weakness. You have to organize as a prerequisite for maintaining, retaining, utilizing your power within this particular group, if this group is in fact a viable group who addresses your particular concerns, which is a rarity.
If we could go back again to the opening comments by Baba Makaru, he was saying that how, obviously recognizing again today as MLK Day, we don't have any national black voices to speak up for ourselves as a collective. And because of that, we don't, there are no, you said white left voices. They're not going to stand up if we're not going to stand up, because who are they going to stand up to? In today's climate, you have the polarization of these white folks. They're either going to be with Biden or they're going to be with Trump, because right now that's how their national collective is forced, right?
Absolutely. The white left is sold out. They have to the Democratic Party. Mm-hmm. Vis-a-vis, during the time of King, they were in direct opposition to the policies of Lyndon Johnson, the war in particular, and saw a need to invest in many of the domestic programs the mistake the system made during the time of King was to make many of the white youth eligible for the draft, which created a backlash on the part of, that particular group, faction, the white left, et cetera, et cetera. The system ultimately eliminated the draft. In doing so, staved off resistance on the part of that group, faction. Many of the members of the white left, of course, organized at a place like Berkeley. DeSalvo made his classic statement. I was very young. There comes a time when the machine becomes so odious, you must strip it of all of its gears. But herein lies the purpose of college debt, because if you are so marooned in debt, well, then you're not going to have time to protest, or you may take a job that is where you're handsomely paid by the corporate state, and you lose sight of this leftist agenda, so to speak. Even at many of these college campuses, they have been redesigned to where you cannot have these mass meetings that was typical of places like Berkeley, where DeSalvo spoke. So they leave nothing to chance in terms of the debt that you accrue, eliminating your activism, and it goes down to the college architecture, where you can no longer assemble in mass to raise this type of consciousness. In fact, Dr. Ture spoke at Cal State Berkeley. Even if a leader were present in 2022, there's not a venue for him to articulate his views, as there was, say 50 years ago.
See, what they do is they learn, and for some reason we don't. They learn and evolve, and we don't. We don't look at how we can push the agenda forward or push the message forward. If Dr. King was marching in the 60s, and you have obviously SNCC and the other groups who were there as well. They learned how to respond to us if that was going to be the route that we used, But so in today's time, if we're still marching 60 years later, then they don't really have a need to step up their antics at all. You know what I'm saying? Because we haven't evolved our any type of guerrilla tactics to get our messages across. You know what I mean? And so why are they going to respond in any kind of way that's going to put them or make them feel like they're in a less powerful position? You know what I'm saying? In the 60s, I watched this documentary a while ago on, I think it was HBO Max, called 1968. And so it kind of chronicled the entire year, everything that had happened, you know what I mean? And it was pretty informative, because obviously I was not around during that time, you know what I mean? But to see what was going on, and to see how Robert Kennedy and JFK, how they were really opposing, or what appeared to be, opposing that southern powerful position, where you had Governor Wallace, really trying to impose his will, and they weren't going for it, and they were standing, well, not standing, but they were going back and forth between DC and Mississippi, and saying, hey, we're not going to tolerate this, and we're going to use all of our measures. Now, what was their agenda? Was it really to segregate? You know what I mean? Or was it really to kind of calm Black folks down so we wouldn't have an uproar? You know what I mean? And really take the country back over, take the country over like we really needed to, even though we wasn't armed like we needed to be armed. But whatever the case was, or whatever their motives were, it helped us as a people, but at the same time, it also, in my opinion, it also crippled us as well, because we continue to have that white savior complex that, oh, they're gonna, the government is gonna protect us, so we just need to, vote the right person in, and they're gonna help us. But even in voting someone in, We had Barack Obama for 8 years. You know what I mean? In the highest position, quote unquote, you know, in the country. What exactly did he do for us as a collective is a question that I know you guys talk a lot often, you know, bring up often. I don't really see it, you know, on the ground level, you know, other than to give us a great smile and a good looking suit. You know, he gave us a great visual, but where was the substance behind that?
Very little substance.
Even the visual wasn't that good, you know. You know, based on the, you know, the amount of homosexuality that he promoted. But I will say this, Gullah Jack, to add to your point about the schools being compromised. Another part of the Black community that was compromised, that was a central piece of organization. As much as I'm not a religious person, the Black church, you know, being taking that political aspect away from the Black church in regards to the 501c3 and the tax obligations, when you have these leaders who are chasing revenue, they took away a place where Black people can meet or organize, a place that we control, where leaders can come in and speak. And by taking that away, you know, you take away essentially the most successful business in the Black community, which is the Black church. You know, Black people have been able to build mega churches everywhere, even more so that we can build schools and corporations. And it's really due to the fact that people come in and they tithe and they pay their money based upon their religion. But when you go in and you tell an organization or a church that they can't be political if they want a certain tax obligation, then you change the direction of that organization or that church from being able to help the community really organize around the political issues that they're facing. So a lot of the issues now with us marching and protesting is in addition to it being outdated, a lot of it is based around us marching and protesting around, not marching and protesting around key issues that we need to focus on. You know, in many cases, we're marching and protesting about the same thing, just in different areas. And I think that if we still had a place where we could centralize our focus on key issues as pertains to owning the Black community, things that would solve our issues, we'd be a lot further than we are.
Yeah, yes, sir. And that brings me back to Dr. King, and currently what's referred to as these faith-based initiatives. You know, what Doc told us was that the church should not be the servant of the state or the tool of the state, but its conscience. In the speech that got him killed, McCarroll, chime in, please. He said, "You ministers of Jesus Christ, avoid saying anything that might disturb the respectable views of certain comfortable members of the congregation. We sacrifice truth on the altar of self-interest, and like Pontius Pilate, yield our convictions to the demands of the crowd." I mean, nobody could rap like Doc, man. Nobody.
Well, that's very true. And regard, well, see, what has happened is that to the extent that there is any kind of other than the sporadic protests that pop up when a white officer kills someone, except in the case of Fanta, the issue that we are going to be inundated with from now until 2024 is voting. The entire struggle has been reduced. There are 360 degrees on a circle, and the entire African American body politic is acting or being driven by people who have some vested interest in this particular focus just on voting rights. Today, the members of the King family marched across the Frederick Douglass bridge, or they were scheduled to. I don't know what the weather was like in D.C. today, but they were scheduled to have a march across. They said that they didn't want any celebration of this is Martin the Third, didn't want any celebration of his father's birthday until there was some significant voting rights act passed. And when the few conversations that I did bother to listen to, I know they had Dr. Bernice King and some other black scholars and people on different shows all during the day, and every single one of them was, all they were talking about was voting rights, voting rights, voting rights, voting rights.
You know, brother, and what Doc told us was that, we are confronting his words. We are confronting issues that cannot be solved without investing billions of dollars, as it relates to ending of poverty, as it relates to the divesting of this imperial project in reinvesting domestically. As much as a gluteus maximus hold that Donald Trump is, that really was his biggest crime. It wasn't grabbing this or grabbing that. It was his insistence that we take a look at the imperial project, divest from NATO. He never articulated what he was going to do with the money, but to interfere, to make those demands, of course, drew the ire on the part of the deep state, in my opinion.
Biden was in Georgia a few days ago talking heavy about voting rights and saying how, he would be in favor of getting rid of the filibuster, which at this particular point is supposedly the reason why the Voting Rights Act or the John Lewis Act isn't being passed. But it's what the politicians do. They provide a lot of lip service so that they can, attempt to galvanize whatever group of people that they want to galvanize at the moment. And then once they're galvanized, and then they vote them back in office, or they vote, more people that go for that particular party line in office, then they sit back and do nothing, because now they're in the position of power. They got you to do what they wanted you to do. But now they don't necessarily feel responsible to do anything, because as a block of black people, where are we?
Powerless. Right.
We talk crazy about Obama, but in the gay rights or LGBT whatever rights that he signed into law, but they came together as a block and moved that agenda and was able somehow to get that agenda on his table. Or maybe the agenda was already there, but they used his face in order to get the agenda signed into law. But my point is, where are we as a block? Again, Makaru talked about where our black voices. Our black voices are in criminals like Al Sharpton, Ben Crump, people who are only going to move when they can be enriched personally, or their organization can be enriched. Because what has Ben Crump won? What has Al Sharpton actually done with the millions and millions of dollars that he's received over the last 30 and 40 years? I mean, we know for a fact that he was a rat for the government up in New York. You know what I'm saying? So, but why do we still listen to him? Because that's who they put in front of us. You got Roland Martin on TV every day, what I'm saying, acting like he's for us. But when you look at the video, he's on stage dancing with Hillary Clinton. You know what I'm saying? Like, these are the people that you want to put in front of us and have them be our voices. But not all of us are gonna co-sign them, because we can see through the buffoonery.
Well, brother, that's why you're here. I mean, there's just not a lot of us around to articulate the agenda that was put forth by Makaru, by Amos and yourself, our departed brother Glenn Ford, and people of that ilk, who are independent thinkers as it relates to an alternative perspective outside of the parameters of what the Democratic Party deems the role that we should play in initiating change. Just not a whole lot of us around. And we appreciate you being here and articulating that point of view.
So,
well, you know,
Yeah, I think
here's the thing.
Right.
I mean, the fact that we don't have, I mean, we have, let's say, you know, we probably have thousands of people that are like us, tens of thousands, but we have not, for whatever reason, we have not been able to reach the masses of people, you know, with our voices. And, you know, I guess that's on us. That's, you know, that's our failure. I mean, it's seriously, you know, it's obviously what we're up against is more massive at this particular point in history, because they understand how significant communications is. But if you can point out 100 things about the failure. You know, I wrote an article when John Lewis passed, with all due respect to him for, you know, what he contributed, you know, in his early days in SNCC, and then essentially turned his back on the organization when they started talking about Black Power, because that didn't fit his agenda of assimilation, you know, into the burning ship that Dr. King began to recognize in 1966 or 67 when he moved north to Chicago and faced the opposition of people who had previously supported him, because now he was coming into their backyard and talking some radical things like, you know, we're going to take the money that these people who live in these slums are paying to the slumlords and use that money to improve the housing of the people there. I mean, when he started identifying with the global movement against colonialism, you know, he was in Ghana, you know, in March of 1957, when you know, the Ghanaian flag with Marcus Garvey's Black Star was raised. And, you know, he just came, he took a circuitous route, but he came back to a lot of his early teachings, you know, from his more radical grandfathers. And so you can point out things like this. Let me give you this example. There are a group of people now in Chicago who are obviously up in arms because you know, Van Dyke is going to be released from prison. So they're calling for a general strike by the transit authority. I don't know who rides the transit in Chicago, but if they call a general strike in Charlotte, it would hurt Black people trying to get to work. I don't know how that works in Chicago, because I don't live there. I would assume it's very similar, because I remember Amos talking about, you know, y'all said y'all want to ride on the front of the bus. White people said y'all can have the whole bus, and we're not even ride. We don't have to ride the bus no more. But they are calling now on Biden, the Biden administration, to file civil rights charges or 14th Amendment charges against Van Dyke. And when you hear that, you say, well, wait a minute. This crime occurred in 2014. Okay, the Chicago police and the political, you know, the remnants of the Daily Machine, at that time being run by the Zionist Rahm Emanuel, covered it up until some people in the media forced them to release the video, and then you actually saw the murder. The Chicago Police Department was exposed. Who was the president? Barack Obama. Who was his attorney general? Loretta Lynch. Black president, Black attorney general, Black man being gunned down in Obama's adopted hometown. No charges, no federal charges, none. And now you want the decrepit, bungling, stumbling, fumbling Biden to file some charges. Well, Biden now is desperate for Black votes. He may do it, you know, just to just to get some black votes, whether they actually ever prosecuted or not. But you have to raise the question, well, why weren't y'all demanding that Obama do this? Oh, we can't. Oh, he's been, Lindsey Graham and Mitch McConnell and those are attacking him. We can't say anything about him. We have to just let him do what he does. I mean, see, this, to me, this is, I have been saying for years, and I probably, from the time I started reading Kwame Nkrumah in the 1970s, and understanding neocolonialism in Africa, and to a lesser extent in the Caribbean, but the same system, and then applying that to what I was beginning to see in the United States. I hadn't developed my thoughts to the point that they are now, but what we have here in the United States with these black politicians and these empire politicians or aspiring empire politicians like Kamala Harris is the same system. It's neocolonialism. Neocolonialism is the bane of the entire African world. And you have various functionaries of neocolonialism in various other industries. The people, for example, pushing black capitalism, the entertainers, for example. All of these people are part of the neocolonial project. And so what they have effectively done, and Amos talks about how this works, when he laid out the 5 levels of power in Blueprint for Black Power, they have very effectively, put, black faces over the tribes of the North Atlantic empires, whether it's France, the United Kingdom, the United States, Germany, Canada, whoever. You have black faces there, and it seemingly has nullified our ability to rally and call for legitimate, call for real Abibi Fahodie, real African power, because we have all of these people in places like Obama. Almost sent me this thing about this clown, this gang of criminals that run Equatorial Guinea, and we have this all over Africa. Gabon, Cameroon, Togo. I mean, all over the African continent. We have these running dog lackeys of European imperialism running those African countries, and you have the same thing running the African American community in the United States, and we don't seem to be able to break through the mental block that is created because we see a black face there.
Well,
that's where the struggle is. Go ahead, bro.
Yeah, very, very quickly, brother. Gunnar Myrdal, it's warrants repeating again. He articulated what's known as the American dilemma, and that is how to oppress, maintain oppression, and convey to the oppressed that the oppressors are the benefactor. Secondly, articulated another way, the nearly fully established, maintained, expanded, refined. In the refinement stage, essentially what you have is a combination of cyanide and Kool-Aid. It looks good, it may taste good, but the results are disastrous. And as I think obviously I go back to Brother Amos. He talked about the 3 characters of oppression. The system is capable of developing a neo-colonial class to achieve its agenda and its interest, a middle class to make it appear as if we're moving toward a more liberal society, and of course an underclass can be created by which they justify oppression.
I think in that refinement stage, Elder Gullah, they use money in order to persuade us and keep us persuaded. And so money and perceived power, because, and I'm sure Baba Makaru can go back much further in instances, because, you know, even today, like today's date was the 17th.
Yes, sir.
They were supposed to be returning President Patrice Lumumba's gold tooth to Congo, right?
Wow.
On today. It was supposed to happen today, and for whatever reason, they canceled it. But I bring that up to say, look what happened to President Patrice Lumumba, Prime Minister Patrice Lumumba. He was, you know, was it Mbutu? I think that was his name.
Shambi, Mobutu. Malcolm talks about. Malcolm referred to those brothers as he referred to Shambi as the worst African who ever lived. You know, Brother Lumumba, of course, was cut up and his body was dissolved in sulfuric acid.
You look at President Thomas Sankara.
For the people.
You know what I mean? Anytime we have somebody who is, especially on the continent, who is for the people, for real for the people, you know, somehow somebody close to them, whether they were implanted or they were able to get flipped, they always go for, you know, the perceived riches and power that this neo-colonialist society promotes to them. So that's a part of that refinement stage.
Yeah, I think another thing that we struggle with as a community is that we're facing so many battles that we're never a part of the war. Mm-hmm. I think that if you go back to the 1800s, where Europeans started to reorganize, knowing that slavery was going to come to an end and that they had to transition their wealth and their power into another phase or form of control in order to continue their ability to have power over everyone. So they transitioned from the slave trade to the Berlin Conference, where then they went in and took over the African continent. Black people in America, even Black people in the diaspora and Black people on the continent were not prepared for that war. You know, you go further during the 1960s, where they knew that they could no longer continue their power with segregation. You know, so they pushed a new ideology, which was integration and assimilation, knowing that would strip, you know, Black people out of control in our community and some of the power that we did have. And, you know, there were some Black people who were aware, just like, you know, in many cases, you have a few Black people, as you stated, Baba Makaru, you know, there are thousands of us who can't seem to get our message out to the masses of the people, to warn our people that, you know, this integration thing is a problem. And I think, you know, right now we're in the same situation with what's happening now. The elites are pivoting again. You know, they're realizing that, you know, this capitalistic system is not sustainable for them to be able to continue to have dominance over everybody else, because people are starting to catch up. So, you know, just this past year and also this year, you know, the World Economic Forum, they're talking about what they're discussing is called the Great Reset, and how they're going to pretty much change globally the direction of people on the planet and your ability to own things. You know, they're calling the world's major problem Western capitalism. and right now, you know, we're still stuck in the smaller battles that we have. You know, I mean, we're talking about voting rights, and these people are talking about world domination.
Exactly.
And I think as long as you're behind these people, in the sense that you don't have any power for yourself to be able to dictate the direction that your people are going, and we're always going to be trying to catch up to or react to the plan that they've already put in place to implement.
Exactly. And, you know, and I'm gonna have to run, but, you know, the key thing that we have to do right now in order to move towards total Abiba Fahodie and total empowerment of African people, that something, you know, along the level of the power that was initiated by Narmer in ancient Kemet, somehow we have got to break the monopoly that this neocolonialism has on our minds. You know, and see all of these functionaries or lackeys, as we used to say in the Black Panther Party, running dog lackeys. We have to see these people as race traitors and as enemies, but it has to be handled very delicately in terms of how we proceed, because you know they like nothing better than internecine conflict, but that is going to be what's necessary. Just like Narmer had to make a hard decision about the Africans who opposed his vision of a unified ancient Kemet. He had to make a hard decision that these obstacles, you know, have to be neutralized. You know, if they don't agree. And so, you know, how do we break the monopoly that this neocolonialism has on our minds and create a critical mass? Because the potential is there. The potential is there, I believe, particularly with the youth in Africa. And, you know, I don't know about this country, but certainly there. And, you know, but if we could, these movements have a way of spiritually mobilizing us when we see things happening, when we see Black people doing positive things that are beneficial, just like we saw, you know, in Africa, Dr. King being right there, you know, when the Ghanaian flag was raised. We see these things, you know, we saw Malcolm traveling across the continent, making, you know, key alliances and whatnot. The potential is there. And, you know, I believe, you know, we can do it. You know, I'm hopeful. I'm not going to say I'm optimistic, but I'm hopeful that that our message will break through. I mean, it's you know, we're up against a very difficult machine.
Powerful forces, brother.
Very, you know, spiritual wickedness in high places.
Yes, sir.
So yeah, but I gotta run, brothers. Y'all can carry on. I gotta get back over and check on my grandson. So y'all take care.
Hotel, brother.
All right, hotel.
Yes, sir. Well, brother, we're hopeful, unhopeful, but not hopeless. You know, one thing that Doc told us was that in every mass mobilization movement, there will always be freeloaders and profiteers. His concern was, in the dominant mass, could you find a substantial number of people who imbued with the characteristics of decency and integrity? You know,
I think one of our issues is that they always look for the assimilants in our group, right, or in any group, you know, because this isn't just something that's done here, and it's not something that's just done in Africa, but it's done on every continent, in every single country where they are and where they go to invade. They look for people who will side with them and be lured by the supposed riches and power, right? So it's that's their tactic. And how are we going to, excuse me, going to respond? You know, Baba Makaru said, hey, you know, what must we do? And from my standpoint, I think it goes back to what Baba Frederick Douglass said. Hey, it's better to educate the children than it is to try to, you know, repair a broken adult or a broken man, right? So I think what we need to be doing is figuring out a way to set up educational systems for ourselves so that we can have the minds of our own children and not allow them to go into PWIs and be swayed by, you know, any other group who may be at the, you know, at the head of a classroom, because the statistics show that, you know, what is it, by the third or fourth grade, essentially we've lost our Black boys, you know what I'm saying, in that educational process. You know, my son, I watched it, you know what I mean, with my own son, you know what I'm saying, who's in 8th grade now. Yeah, he was energetic about education and being smart, you know what I'm saying. And I think what it takes is, I think it takes like a 3 or 4 or 5 year process if you're starting them in kindergarten, in order for that process to actually turn the tide, because they're sitting here with this white person heading a classroom, and they have to listen to everything that they say. So it's an indoctrination process. And I think by the 3rd or 4th grade, I think it clicks. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's when we lose our boys. You know what I'm saying? And they're gone, maybe not forever, but for a certain period of time. But we have to make sure that we're vigilant in making sure that they're not just getting education out of the school system, but we're also educating them at home. So that means we have to educate ourselves as well. And I think that for us as adults, as Brother Amos was saying, we're fighting battles every single day. You know what I'm saying? And that's how the society was evolved, to make sure that we're fighting the battle every single day so that we can't fight the entire war. We're worried about putting food on the table. You know, you got grocery stores and every kind of corporation just raising prices just because they can, just because there is no, the government is not going to step in and say, hey, that's wrong. Why? Because the government is run by the corporate system. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, they have a system and we have to create our own system. And it has to take brothers like, you know, ourselves to link up with brothers and sisters, you know what I'm saying, in other states, cities, countries, continents, wherever we are, so that we can link up and try to move this Black liberation ideology as oh my God, what's the brother who, oh my God, I can't think of his name.
James Cone?
No, not James Cone. The brother wrote the book. Oh man, I can't think of his name right now. But we talk about him. We talk about him often. But we have to create this theology, and in the theology, you know, make sure that we are educating ourselves and educating our people at every single step of the way, just like they do. You know, you have the CRT issue that you know, states like Florida and Texas pass laws say, yo, we don't even want to talk about MLK. MLK is like, you know, he's the nonviolent, you know, guy who was marching. So if you're not going to talk about him, then there is no way you're going to talk about the people who we respect. You know what I'm saying? Such as your Kwame Therese or your Marcus Mosiah Garveys, and obviously Baba Omar Wallace. You're not going to talk about the people who pose like real threats to the societal structure.
Yeah, well, you know, Dr. King owned so many guns that he called it, that his collection was called an arsenal. Mm-hmm. Now, he was developing what I refer to as a coercive power strategy, you know, to paralyze the economy of the United States. You know, had he descended on Washington summer of 1968 as it was planned, he knew that he had to synthesize the militant segments of our movement with his nonviolent approach. There had to be some type of connectedness there, because he was losing popularity near the end of his life. You know, you find that 77% of whites opposed Dr. King prior to April 4th, 68, and about nearly 60% blacks. You know, taking heed to this Senator Edward Brooke, U.S. Senator out of Massachusetts, who said that Martin Luther King was doing irreparable damage to his movement by linking civil rights issues with international issues of Vietnam. Few people could make the connection between, and it was a very simple connection, the money and resources allocated toward Vietnam, and invariably the negative effect, the adverse effect it had on the domestic programs here in the United States. You know, as simple as it was, you know, people thought that he was abandoning civil rights without making the connection between, you know, what was happening in, well, you know, it's not necessary to go on. But clearly one of the more misunderstood brothers of my time applied for a gun permit in St. Johns County, Florida, and was denied. So take it wherever you want to take it. How we doing with time, brother Amos?
We over time.
Okay. You want to close? Okay, go ahead, brother. Do your thing. I
want to add one point before we close out. Oftentimes when we're studying our history, and I think when a lot of people study our history, we look at the things that we think made us successful or caused or allowed us to have success, and then we also try to analyze the areas that we failed in. And I think that historically, when African people were great, it was when we were leaders in technology, not just technology in regards to building structures, but military technology. Where African people start to fail is when other groups from other countries surpassed us in military technology. And that's one of the primary reasons in the Nile Valley why they lost a lot of wars during the time of Taharqa. And the other wars that they did lose to the Persians and the Assyrians is because they did not have advanced weaponry like the Assyrians and the Persians did. Similar to, the European pretty much conquesting the entire world, it was because they enhanced their technology from a military standpoint with weapons. And I think that we've been too conservative when it comes to, your military strength and technology in general around, having the weapons to match, not only match, but we should be thinking about surpassing the people that are around us. And I think that is what is going to allow Black people to have power. I think we have the education. We know Black people know how to do economics. The problem is that we don't have the power to stop Europeans and others from prohibiting us from doing the economics. African countries can't trade with each other because it's some European or Western country that's blocking them from being able to do so with a gun to their head, or with, like you said, Brother Jasper, the money or the incentives that are given to these leaders to pretty much portray their people. So until we advance in those areas from a technological standpoint, militarily, this will be a continuous cycle. Because if we can't beat the people that are doing this to us, then no matter how much economic power we gain, or even no matter how much knowledge we gain, until it's used in those areas of enhanced our technology, we're not going to win this war.
And so Black liberation theology, Bobby E. Wright.
Yeah. Dr. Wright.
I couldn't think of his name. And while Amos, I'm like, I know the brother's name. Where's his name?
I know what's bothering the living Hades out of you, man. Bobby
Yes,
Wright out of Hobbs, Mississippi, the psychopathic racial personality and other essays.
Yes, sir. Brother Amos, and I have to go as well. I was supposed to have been to work 15 minutes ago. They'll be all right. But you're
loving this venue, brother.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Of course, I always love to talk with my brothers. But as we know, the reason why our military science did not evolve is because our nature is totally different than everybody else around us. We didn't have to war with each other or other people in order to live. Because the continent had plenty, whereas other cultures, whether they were coming out of the ice or coming back out of Asia, trying to move back into Africa,
cradle theory.
Yes,
you sounded like brother Shake out the job.
Yes, sir. Look, you got to read all the books, but they had to evolve their military science in order to survive, where we did not. And I think that we are not collectively in a survival mode. We're in a survival mode, but we're just trying to get by. But we're not in a survival mode and saying that we will be extinct as a people if we continue down the path that we're in, because we're watching our genocide every single day, whether we're killing each other or we're being killed by other people, and then there's no retribution. You know, Van Dyke is about to be a free man. Okay. I don't want to say anything crazy, you know what I'm saying, on a public format, but it's hard not to.
I mean, I think that, you know, historically we did have leaders who were, you know, offensive leaders who were, you know, focused on advancing, you know, military science. You know, if you look at, you know, Mkeparata Hudimis, if you look at, you know, Shaka Zulu, even if you look at Narmer, I mean, in some cases, you know, Africa, you know, started, and this is one of the things that I want to point out, because you know, a lot of our scholars often say that point that you just made about the difference or the dichotomy between the European and the African as it pertains to warfare. I think that Africa has always had warfare. It's just that people choose not to observe that warfare for what it was. If you go back to the first dynasty, there were Africans warring with each other, even during the time when Norma was trying to expel, you know, the foreigners and unify Upper and Lower Kemet. Or even if you go to, you know, later periods, you know, where Shaka was, you know, was going through and pretty much consuming other tribes around him to expand his dominance. I think the issue with us has been that, like you stated earlier about this assimilationist, is that people have looked at our weaknesses and they've exploited them from knowing how to connect with the people who will make us weak and give those people power, and empower those people to have power over enough people to help them gain control of a region or a territory or area. But also, I think that there's also a level of conservatism from us in regards to advancing, especially in the areas of military technology. A lot of times we are very conservative people, pretty much all around the board. I mean, every Black person is naturally conservative. All this liberal stuff, it's not naturally who we are. So, you know, we allow ourselves to get stagnant while other groups continue to focus on advancing in those areas. And the way that we've been getting our ass kicked for the past 2,000 years, we should be in the mode of wanting to advance that, because we know we need it to survive.
Right. I'm with you 1,000%.
But yeah, I know we over time, and once again, brother, I know you got to go to work. Sorry for holding you so long, and we say Asante Sana for joining us, and we'd love to have you back. You know, anytime that you want to come, you're definitely welcome to join.
Asante Sana, I appreciate the invitation. It's good talking with my brothers all the time.
Baby Fahodier.
Baby Fahodier, gentlemen.
Yes, sir.
Baby Fahodier.